Shrink in size and embark on a huge adventure in The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap, only on Game Boy Advance.
Welcome to Remember 64, where this week we shrink down to Minish size. Welcome to the show, everyone. My name, of course, is David Petrangelo, and this week it's a special edition of Remember 64. If you have been listening to the episodes as they are released, not everybody does, and that's part of the point, honestly. So you can go and reference any of these games at any time, but in recent weeks I've had a couple of things, life gets in the way, my furnace broke, and I was away for a couple of weeks, blah, blah, blah. Don't have to get into it, but really, what's happening here is I'm going to talk about one of the games that I mentioned on Patreon a few weeks ago when I began to play The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap. I played that on the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack, and this is sort of an expansion pack episode, which you may have seen on your feed and on the Patreon feed as well. And I had my initial thoughts on Patreon, so you can check that out, but I thought right now it would be time to dig into Minish Cap a little bit. I have this Switch Online expansion pack now. This is one of the Legend of Zelda titles I've never played. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode, I would say. Normally take a few minutes here and there on Patreon every few weeks to talk about some games that I'm not playing on the Nintendo 64, and this is going to be one of them. But I'm going to dig into a little bit of the development, some comments from developers, and some reviews along the way as well. I thought I would do something slightly different and not leave everybody hanging on the podcast feed. But yeah, without further ado, let's head back to January of 2005. Today's show is brought to you by EPOS Gaming Audio, with a comprehensive lineup of both wired and wireless headsets, gaming amplifiers, microphones, and webcams. EPOS has everything you need to experience the power of audio. Like their H6 Pro lineup, which features two versions, an open or closed headset. The closed headset allows you to tap into exceptionally detailed audio and seals out ambient noise, while the open version delivers natural, high-fidelity audio with an incredible soundstage. Both headsets include a magnetic, detachable microphone and a sleek design that has no wild RGB configurations, just good design. Listeners can save 15% by visiting www.eposaudio.com/gaming and entering the code EPOSFRIEND15 at checkout. That is EPOS Audio, EPOSAUDIO.com/gaming, and entering the code EPOSFRIEND15, no spaces, no underscores, no points. All of that can be entered at checkout for a 15% discount.
Mystic, microscopic, conqueror. You can use the power of the Minish Cap to get small, unlock clues, and save Hyrule. The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap, only for Game Boy Advance. Rated E for everyone.
Released in January of 2005 in North America, the Minish Cap is one of several titles now under the Capcom label. Yes, the same studio that brings you the Resident Evil and Street Fighter series. They had their hand in other Legend of Zelda games, such as Oracles and Seasons on the Game Boy Color. But Minish Cap was one of the latest ones that they did around this time. And in an interview in 2005, the director and supervisor of Minish Cap from Nintendo said, quote, "Our two development themes for a Zelda on GBA were, one, to do something no one had done before, and two, make something that would really bring out Capcom's style." And this, personally, is one of the things that I loved about this game, love about this era of games as well. The GBA just has this certain aesthetic and sprite style to it that not every game has, but many do, and I really love the art style in this. And they also added in this interview, with Minish Cap, we started off by asking, how can we make this feel like a Capcom game? Our answer was to feature Capcom's talent for beautiful, exquisite 2D graphics. Again, my opinion, they nailed that part right out of the park. They also spoke to Capcom about making this, quote, more ominous than Link to the Past, so it would have a similar feel at times to the classic Link to the Past, but they wanted aspects of this to feel a little bit darker, a little bit more moody, and I think at times I felt like this game had that. It didn't really run away with that concept, but every once in a while you'd be in a dungeon or an area that were a little bit more gloomy, such as the marshes and things like that. But this is exactly what Nintendo wanted to do, was something different, and that's, to me, what I think Minish Cap excels at, is doing something different, bringing you to Hyrule. Your Link, Zelda needs to be saved, the world needs to be saved, and this time there's, an evil wizard, so to speak, and all of that stuff is still there, but literally a different perspective on the Legend of Zelda series. You shrink down to miniature size, or in this, Minish size, and you see the world in a different light, at a different perspective, and you can do and interact with so many different things, do a lot of different fun things, and be able to traverse around Hyrule and parts of Hyrule in different ways. And sure, maybe that's just, the puzzle gimmick or mechanic and all of that kind of MacGuffin, some people would use that term, but I think it never felt tired. It never felt forced. It was always rewarding when you were able to shrink down and then come back up to human size. I think, honestly, that Minish Cap is now one of my favorites. It is one of my favorite Legend of Zelda titles. I have not played them all. I have played probably about 60% of Legend of Zelda titles out there. But the series is fantastic. I love 2D Zeldas as well, and this one is right up there for me. In another interview just before the game released, so this interview was taking place in 2004, the creators said, quote, with Minish Cap, we decided to include a number of things that were really more geared towards 3D, but we tried to make them on a 2D plane. We wanted to impress players. For example, one room, there's a small staircase on top of a bookshelf. When you become small, you can walk across the joists on the roof to get there. The first time I saw this scene, I was taken aback and said, whoa, that's amazing. The joists themselves were depicted with great detail, and they're very realistic. At this time, of course, as you sit here and listen to a Nintendo 64 podcast, you know that 3D in Zelda games was massive at this point. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask were massive, massive hits. You can hear our thoughts on Majora's Mask on your podcast feed. It's just a great deep dive and great discussion we had on that. It was the first time I played it. And the creators also added to this and mentioned the fact that 3D was sort of now what people were thinking when they thought of a Link Zelda adventure. They said, quote, Zelda games are interesting in 3D, but we're aiming for Minish Cap on the 2D GBA field and game that can compete with the 3D Zeldas. Utilizing all our technological expertise, we're trying to make something that will be called the pinnacle of 2D gaming. Now, for anyone who may be listening to this in Europe or grew up in Europe at the time, this was the first time that a game in the Zelda series was released in Europe before it headed to North America. Fun little thing there. The main reason was that the Nintendo DS, with the European DS launch scheduled for spring of 2005, Nintendo of Europe wanted to make Minish Cap get there before this. They wanted to hit that Christmas holiday season, and that's exactly what they did. So just a couple of months before, in 2004, that's when this hit European shelves. Sadly, this is something that, especially at the time, and especially in the 80s and 90s, never happened. Europe always got stuff later. This was the first exception in the Legend of Zelda series. Just a few months after its complete worldwide release, The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap sold over 1 million copies. That is one of the fastest selling handheld Zelda games of all time. Reviews at the time gave it very high scores. It sits anywhere between the mid-80s to mid-90s if you're looking at numbers out there on Metacritic, for example. But some of them criticized the fact that Minish Cap was a little too short, especially compared to previous titles. And sure, if you compare that to the Nintendo 64 games, I could agree with that. But I actually, personally, in my unofficial review here, think that that's actually a bonus. I think that Minish Cap excels at being a little bit shorter than others and being a little bit more compact. Literally a great experience for a handheld. Sure, when I played it on Switch Online, I had save states, for example. You can sort of just put your Switch to sleep, and at the time you're playing on GBA, sure, there's a little bit of a different experience there, but I actually think that regardless of how you saved things and how you experienced the dungeons and exploring and everything, I actually like that this game was smaller in scale. Not literally with the Minish abilities, but just the fact that it was a little bit quicker. I played this over the course of about 7 to 10 days to completion, and that was great. I loved that experience. I love the fact that I could get through this in, what would essentially be a vacation if I was on vacation at the time. Despite a little bit of criticism, every game has it. Not every game is perfect. It did receive a decent amount of rewards. GBA Game of the Year at GameSpy, GameSpot, and IGN. And then on Nintendo Power, the 2005 GBA Game of the Year and the 24th best game on a Nintendo console. Well, thank you everyone for joining me on this sort of mini package size of a Remember 64 episode. I know it wasn't about a 64 game, but I really want to get the word out about Minish Cap. I think that's part of it, and just sort of share my experience of playing games that are not part of the 64 lineup. That is something you'll definitely hear on the Patreon page, patreon.com/Remember64show. No, it is not always going to be a Nintendo title, not always going to be something that you can find on Switch, but at this time I figured, you know what, I want to share my thoughts, something I've been playing over the course of the last month, and didn't want to leave anybody hanging in the feed a little quieter than it normally is. But back to the regular stuff in just a little bit. If you want to support the show, you can head over to Patreon. As little as $1 a month. We'll get you episodes early, including video content on our YouTube page. YouTube is Remember-64, and then everything on social media is at Remember64show. If you are listening to this in June or July of 2023, you'll know that there's a whole lot of stuff going on social media at the moment. I'm going to try and secure all the Remember 64 show handles across the board. That includes other things like Blue Sky. I will keep you posted. Right now, you can find everything on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Remember 64 show. And other than that, I really appreciate everyone for joining me on this journey so far in Remember 64. I can't wait to share the slew of amazing games, guests, and topics that we're going to be talking about on our podcast feed, on Patreon, and on social media. All right, everyone, have a great week. We'll see you next time.